Link functions are extremely useful but also a bit limiting. They should really only be used to link the scope of our directive with the scope of the element that invoked that directive. Things like pulling in the parent scope's properties and methods that we would like to use within our directive, as well as performing transformations on that calling element, or doing things with attributes provided in that element that called our directive. For all other business logic that we would like to incorporate into our directive, we should include it in a controller that we bind specifically to that directive. And that's what we're going to talk about in this section. So I'm going to go ahead and add a controller property to our directive whose value is the name of the controller that we want to bind to our directive. We haven't defined this controller yet, so we need to go ahead and do that by invoking the angular.controller method and specifying the name of the controller and the controller function definition. Then I'm going to inject the dependencies that we need for that controller, in this case just the $scope object, and finally I'm going to define the controller function itself. And it's a very simple definition that assigns the string hello world to the message property of our $scope object. Now you'll probably be wondering, what's the difference between this example and the previous example where we included the message property in the directive's parent controller? And the net result is really rather the same, but the purpose is to simply demonstrate that we can bind controllers to our directives themselves. This will become a lot more important when we start talking about making server-side requests via our Angular application in the next lesson on Angular Fire and Firebase. For now, just make sure you understand the difference between binding a controller to our directive and accessing the controller in the parent scope of our directive. Let's go to our browser to make sure it still works properly. And indeed, when we load up our browser, it displays the hello world message in our web page.